If you watched my last video, you know I said that Bernie Sanders was about to cross 5 million individual contributions. Well, Sanders' campaign has just announced that he has done it. Bernie Sanders has officially crossed 5 million individual contributions, making him the only Democratic candidate to have more individual contributions than Donald Trump. But that's not the only news. Just this morning, Bernie Sanders has officially announced his Q4 fundraising haul, and it is absolutely massive at $34.5 million. A few days ago, the New York Times had run a piece talking about the estimated fundraising haul, and they were estimating that Bernie would bring in roughly $28 million, which of course just that alone would have put him over the top. But at $34.5 million, Bernie is absolutely killing it. Now, just for comparison, at this time in 2015, Bernie Sanders had raised a total of $73 million from 1 million donors and a total of 2.5 million donations. Now, as you can see, then Bernie has killed, absolutely destroyed his previous records, because 2015 he broke records, he broke Obama's records, but now Bernie has killed those records again with 5 million contributions. Bernie has doubled the number of contributions overall, and roughly right now Bernie has about 1.6 to 1.7 million donors total. So he has more donors, and he also has more donations, and obviously he has raised significantly more money. The estimate for this year is that he's raised roughly $96 million, so significantly more than the $73 million, and that is breaking down from the 4 quarters. So in Q1, Bernie Sanders raised $18.2 million, and then in Q2, slightly down, raising $18 million. Then in Q3, he raised $25.3 million, which was a huge haul. But then now in Q4, destroying that number again, absolutely massive haul, $34.5 million. Now, just for comparison with the rest of the field, and some of these numbers are estimates because only Buttigieg and Bernie have currently announced their total numbers, so some of these are estimates. But right now we have Buttigieg, who has announced that he raised $24.7 million, which is significantly up from the $19 million which he raised in Q3. Although in Q2, Buttigieg had outraised everyone, including Bernie, when he raised $24.8 million. So Buttigieg is back up to his Q2, very close to his Q2 numbers, and now Yang is estimated to have raised about $12.5 million, which is up quite a bit from his $10 million that he raised last quarter. Warren not doing so good. She announced a few days ago that she was at 17 million and that she was aiming to reach 20 million, but even that is not particularly great for her, because in Q3 Warren had raised nearly $25 million, a very significant haul. But so it seems like Warren's slide in the polls is also seems to be affecting her fundraising numbers, so that is not good. Now, surprisingly, Biden is up significantly. He has raised an estimate of 21.5 million, which is significantly up from his Q3 numbers, which were particularly problematic for him because he had actually spent roughly 17 million, and so was $2 million in the hole for the third quarter, which is definitely, obviously not a place where you want to be. Now, the interesting thing here when you look at these numbers is to see Buttigieg so high. Obviously, Bernie is completely at the top of the field, but I've seen a few people online. I was scrolling through some Reddit forums this morning and yesterday after Buttigieg announced his numbers, wondering why Buttigieg was able to raise so much money considering how poorly he is polling. One of the things that I think is relevant to think about here is that Buttigieg is really the only candidate with any capability of being able to stop Bernie's momentum. That doesn't mean that he could win the nomination with nearly 0% support among black voters. He has basically no chance of winning the nomination outright, but he is decently well positioned in terms of polling in Iowa and in New Hampshire. And so, if the rich donor class really wants to stop Bernie, honestly, their best bet is to fund Buttigieg, because he's really the only person who has any possibility of stopping Bernie in Iowa. Because honestly, if Bernie wins Iowa, he's almost certain to win New Hampshire. And I've said it before in a previous video, in the history of the Democratic primary since they've had the states voting in the order that they do, any candidate who has won Iowa and then won New Hampshire has then gone on to win the whole thing. Now, of course, that's not guaranteed, but Bernie is also very well positioned in Nevada with his great support among Latino voters. And of course, in that case, if he also won Nevada, he'd be competitive in South Carolina. And then going into Super Tuesday, honestly, it would be Bernie would have a really, really good shot at winning and winning the nomination itself. Now, because the whole thing really is about stopping Biden on electability. And so, of course, the best way to do that is to actually, beat Biden. Because if you actually poll voters and you ask them which candidate they think agrees with them the most, they say Bernie. They don't say Biden, even though they're going to vote for him. Now, because it used to be, if you ask voters policy by policy, and it would, line up, and it would say that on average, they would agree with Bernie more on policy than on Biden. But then if you ask them, which candidate agrees with them the most, they'd still say Biden. Recently, that has flipped, and now voters are saying that they agree with Bernie more on policy than they do on Biden. However, then if you ask voters who they think is more likely to beat Donald Trump, they'll say Biden, and then ultimately the polls show Biden leading. However, if you manage to shatter that perception of electability, which by the way isn't even there, because if you actually look at head-to-head matchup polls between the two against Donald Trump, Bernie and Biden are always within 1 or 2 percentage points of one another. And of course, a lot of Bernie's support is over there in the Rust Belt, where it really needs to be in order to beat Donald Trump. So look, I mean, I'm not saying that it's some kind of smoke-filled room conspiracy where all these donors are getting together like, how can we stop Bernie? Well, let's fund Buttigieg, but really we want Biden. But look, clearly that is where the incentive structure lies for big money. If they want to stop Bernie, they know that Buttigieg is a really good way to stop him, even if, obviously Buttigieg has no serious chance of ever winning. And if you look at the bundlers themselves and the industries behind them, Buttigieg and Biden have very similar industries and very similar backers, funding their campaigns. So in that sense, both of them are kind of working together in a sense to stop Bernie. But again, the really, really good news, I don't want to end on the downer there, but the really, really good news is that certainly with Bernie's massive haul of $34.5 million, it doesn't look like Buttigieg's haul is going to be enough to be able to stop Bernie. So that's the good news. So anyway, that's the video. I just wanted to give you that really, really sort of quick update about the fundraising numbers. So yeah, that's the video. If you liked it, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button and consider subscribing. Thanks.